So with the new C80 coming out, I'm sure a lot of you have questions just like I did, like how it's going to compare to the C70. As it's been the thing that most of us have been asking for is a full frame C70, so it's finally here. So pretty exciting day for most of us that are really interested in it. What I am here to talk about is how the C70 and the C80 compare to each other, specifically for wedding videographers. 95% of my work comes from wedding videography, so I'm going to keep it very specific to wedding videographers and what matters to us. So some of this information might be useful for other types of work and things, but I'm going to keep this very specific to wedding videographers and how the C80 compares to the C70 and if it's really worth the upgrade from the C70 to go to the C80. It's probably going to be a pretty long video. I'm going to, down below, you'll be able to see actual chapters of things that I am testing. I'm going to go pretty extensive into like real world tests, so you'll be able to skip the parts that you actually on things that you might actually be interested. That way you can make a decision for yourself if it's worth the upgrade. I was really excited and really interested in the C80 when it was announced because of the triple base ISO. As you know, running and gunning with one of these cameras on a wedding day, the lighting changes as you're going indoor, outdoors, and especially like toward the reception time. So running with the C70 for the past year, wasn't always the best come reception with the low lighting. I mean, once you get past 3200 ISO, the image starts to fall apart and break down. You know, you can push it to 6400, but it just wasn't great. So I'm really excited to do a lot of testing with the C80 on this triple base ISO. So the bulk of the testing I'm really going to be trying pushing is low light performance, ISO ranges, and dynamic range. Both of these cameras claim to have 16 stops of dynamic range, and over the years we have seen the C70 really prove itself to to have those 16 stops of dynamic range, and that DGO sensor in the C70 has just been absolutely incredible in catching all that dynamic range that you need. So one of the things I'm also going to be testing here more in the daylight is whether this new back illuminated stacked CMOS sensor that the C80 has in it is going to compare to the C70's DGO sensor. As far as each camera goes, because we're wedding videographers, a lot of us don't always shoot in RAW. I think in the C80 I'm going to be shooting a lot more of the weddings in that 6K RAW, because I really don't use a lot of slow motion. I don't shoot in 60 frames a second too much because of how much footage we have. I say a majority of us are shooting in log and shooting in that C-Log too. So what I will be shooting in both of these cameras, just to keep it as accurate as possible, again, because this is about specifically wedding videography, I will be shooting XAVC 10-bit 422. It'll be all in IPB. And all in 24 frames a second. I will have everything linked on every clip that I make, what it is, and if I do shoot in some RAW, I will shoot it in RAW at some point, but that will be noted. Otherwise, everything will be in log. Just know that. As far as the lenses being used, RF 24 to 70 on the C70 and the RF 70 to 200 on the C80. That way we can get the same exact picture. I found that using both of these lenses over the years, they both have the same contrast and colors. There's no shift in anything, so I'm not going to use any Sigma lenses or anything else. These are going to be the two lenses that are on the camera the entire time. That way we can get the same image and we can make everything look exactly alike, so we can compare them the best that we can. Hey, Future Gabe here. While I was going through editing a lot of this footage, I forgot to mention that all these tests that I'm doing, we're going to keep it real simple with the color grade. I'm throwing a Phantom Canon neutral LUT over both the C70 and the C80, just to keep everything consistent, and there will be no changes to anything when I'm editing as much as possible. And if I do make any changes, I'll probably note that on the screen. Like if I lift the offset or gain or anything up in DaVinci, or I change anything, I'll probably put it on the screen, but I will do the exact same thing to both clips or both cameras the same exact way. Otherwise, a lot of this like talking head stuff like I'm doing now will be fully color graded, so you'll be able to tell which is which. But at least for all the tests, I want to keep that as accurate as possible. So a simple Phantom conversion LUT to Rec 709, and that's pretty much it. This is where I really fell in love with the C70 and the dynamic range. So you got all this sunlight kind of just hitting this side of my face, and what was nice about that DGO sensor is it was able to kind of just bring all these highlights back and keep all the detail, even in this harsh sunlight. So this first test is just going to be, I want to see how the sensors both compare with the sunlight hitting the side of my face. It's kind of coming through the trees here and hitting this side of me. So I'll just be recording. I'm going to go back here and change the ND filters a few times just to get some shots that are overexposed and some that are underexposed. I just want to see if the dynamic range between the two are comparable, and if we can still keep that detail in the highlights and the shadows as the sun comes in and out of the clouds here. This is 4 stops ND, 800 ISO. Aperture is at 2.8. All right, we're overexposing. NDs went down to 2 stops. All right, we're underexposing a little bit here. NDs were all set to 6 stops. NDs are set to 8 stops. It looks extremely underexposed from here. Right now in the waveform, I can see that the sun's out and everything's a little overexposed. My face is definitely overexposed. So we'll see on both cameras if we can bring this back down and how well it levels out. All right, same lighting. I put the ND filters up to 4 stops. We're still at 800 ISO. Everything else is still the same. So this is about where I would like to expose in direct sunlight. So we'll see how these both compare just like this. So this is just a little test to see how both sensors stack up while the sun is coming from behind. Here I do have, I can see on the waveform, my face is very well exposed. A dynamic range test here in my garage. So this is one like a real big deal to me. The C70 is always, I thought, done really good here with being able to capture the highlights and the shadows really well, and just combining an image with that DGO sensor and dual gain output, which is exactly what it does. It takes 2 different gains and puts them together and gives you an image that has very, very high dynamic range. So with both of these claiming to have 16 stops of dynamic range, I want to see if I can pull some of these shadows from my garage up and still have the detail, and which one kind of does better. But I have both cameras exposure set what I thought made me look to be well exposed. We'll try to pull up these shadows over here, see how it looks, bring down the highlights, see if we can kind of level this out to see which one of these cameras keeps the most detail from back here. Okay, so this is one of the most important tests to me that I really wanted to see. I think this tests the dynamic range really well. So a lot of times on the wedding day, the bride and groom, they're getting ready in hotels, or you know, the venue's getting ready rooms, whatever. So a lot of times our shot is going to be them kind of backlit, and you're getting more of this shot right here. So I'm going to run through a few tests of kind of like the window backlighting me, just to see between these 2 cameras what really holds a dynamic range. This is a high dynamic range kind of shot here, and I would actually expect the C70 to do better than the C80 here. Right now I'm kind of exposed more for the highlights in the background, so I'm probably going to be really, really dark here. I think I'm still very underexposed here in this shot, but kind of give us another idea how this goes. All right, right here in this shot, this is ideally where I kind of like to expose somebody's face for the room. The background's clearly blown out. I don't expect us to be able to get any highlights back from that, but in those kind of low light shots, when you're trying to, you know, still save the background. What I've seen between these two cameras is the highlight performance is exactly alike. I really can't find too much of a difference between the two. I'm able to pull the highlights back on most of our shots, no problem. The shadows, even though the C80 does have that full frame backside illuminated sensor, I just see the C70 still has cleaner shadows and some of those more underexposed shots. So here I just want to do a little bit of pixel peeping. That way they both match up just from the looks of the back of the camera. And then we're gonna, in post, we're gonna zoom in and see what this looks like, just to see what the resolution looks like. As we know, the C80 is downsampled from 6K, so it should have a lot sharper image. My love-hate relationship with the C70 is that it had a very soft image, so it had more, say, a filmic look to it, but it also had a very soft image, so sometimes it just, when you wanted that sharpness out of it, you weren't getting it. For this test, I just want to look at the sensor. So this is 4K full frame XAVC. I'm just going to compare this out to the Super 35 setting, just to see what how the sharpness compares in the C80. So this is full frame, and this is Super 35 in the C80. This is Super 35. So I want to crop in both just to see if that full frame, old 6K is a little bit sharper than the Super 35 crop mode that's in the C80. And this is raw 6K. This is raw 6K. Right here, I just want to test the RAW capability of both cameras. The C80, we have it in 6K RAW LT. The C70, we have it in 4K DCI RAW LT. So obviously from the C80, we're going to see a lot sharper image with that full frame sensor, as well as the 6K. But just to see how both of them kind of stack up. The lighting conditions and everything here, I think, are really good. We have a base ISO at 800. And the aperture is at 4.0, so I don't really expect to see much grain when we punch into it, but just a test here to see how they both look. Alright, so I'm going to test the ISO a little bit here in the daylight. I don't think this is a very good test to see how the ISO performance is. I mean, right now I have perfect lighting conditions. I'm going to do an ISO test with raising the NDs and then raising the ISO, even though we're in the daylight. So we have a lot of nice light coming in. But the main tests that we're going to do for ISO for cameras are going to be actual low light. At nighttime with small light, or something to more emulate what we're going to be seeing at weddings. Like in receptions, most of the places we do receptions are extremely dark, almost no lighting at all, and we light them by ourselves. So I'm going to do this test, but I would not take this as the end all be all on how well the ISO performs in these cameras. So right now, as it currently stands, 800 ISO on both, the base ISO, and everything's, I can see the waveforms, everything's very, very well exposed. So we're going to raise the ND filters up. I'm going to let you know what the NDs are set at in the ISO each time. Again, if you want to skip past this and get to the an actual low light test, go for it. But just anyone that wanted to see this, it's here. All right, this is now four stops. I did have 2 stops of ND, so this is ND4, still with the ISO 800. ND filters are still set at 4. ISO is now 3200 on both cameras. ND is set at 6 on both cameras, and the ISO is at 3200. The ND on both cameras is set at 10, and the ISO is at 12,800. Both cameras are set at pretty much what I see as perfect exposure here. They're set at 800 ISO, ND is 4 stops. ISO 800, 2 stops ND. ISO 800, 0 stops on the ND. 800 ISO, ND set at 6 stops. ISO 3200, ND 6 stops. ND 6 stops, ISO 6400 on both. 6400 ISO and 8 stops ND. Eight stops ND, ISO 12,800. Ten stops ND, ISO 12,800. We're going to go overexpose the hell out of some footage and see if the C80 with how well the C70 did on recovering highlights. What we're going to go over in this test is overexposure. I got the sun out right now, so hopefully it stays out for a little while. But I'll just adjust with the ISOs and some other things just to overexpose the image. We'll see if we can bring them both back down, and they're pretty comparable. But I'd like to do some extremes too with the overexposure. Right now I'm a little bit overexposed. The waveforms are all up there close to 100 on the IRE. So it's going to pretty much wash out my face, and we'll see if we can bring back all these details and the highlights. All right, ISO on both cameras says 1600. Everything from the look of the monitors here, everything looks extremely overexposed here. All right, we raised the ISO up to 3200 here. From the look of the waveform and the ISO, everything looks completely white. It looks like a snowy day, so I can't even see any detail on my face from here. So we'll see if the cameras can bring back this detail and which one kind of does the best. This is 4 ND on both cameras. ISO is at 800. So just a little bit of overexposure here, but definitely something that both should be able to recover fairly well. All right, this is 2 stops NDs on both cameras. ISO is at 800. Both seem to be clipping, especially in those white areas of the page and kind of the background. This is no ND at all. Aperture's 2.8 ND, or I'm sorry, ISO 800. All right, this test we have complete sun down, and we're gonna just go through the ISO ranges and see how they look here. It's a little past blue hour, so it's actually getting pretty dark out. So I found this kid over here. He's gonna help me with this test. This is 800 ISO. Go ahead and move your head. 1600 ISO. Good. 3200 ISO. 6400 ISO. 12,800 ISO. This is 12,800 ISO. Aperture is 7.1. Okay, for this part, it's completely dark outside right now. So the only thing we're lighting the scene with is my son's over here holding the lamp. We're going to start with 800 ISO and work our way up. 3200 ISO. Hey, hold it more out. There you go, right there. Yep. 6400 ISO. $12,800 ISO. This is 12,800 ISO. The lamp is back by the cameras about 8 feet away. 25,600 ISO. Okay, something I want to touch on briefly here is the base ISO selection. So when you come into the menu here and you go to the first tab there, number 3, you have this selection here with base ISO. So I have it left on auto selection, which is probably what I'm just going to leave it on for the majority of the time. But you can actually select your base at 800, 3200, and 12,800. So if you leave it on auto selection, which I probably would, it's automatically going to switch as you're going up through the ISO ranges. So as you go up and you pass 3200, it's going to change the base ISO to 3200. I think once you get past 4,000, it changes the base, or no, once you get to 12,800, it changes the base. I forget exactly. There's a chart online that shows. So what the question would be is, when would you ever want to change this auto selection? So the question would be, why would you choose to manually set the base ISO? Because if you go here and press 800, it's going to give you an ISO range of 160 up to 6400, and that's all the further you can go. And it's going to be pretty noisy up there at 6400. So why would you want to ever change this? I think in some rare instances, maybe you want the base ISO to be 3200 so that you can, slightly drop below to like 1600. That way you could preserve the shadows a little bit more and get a cleaner image in the shadows. For a majority of shooting, especially for what we do as wedding videographers, I'm going to leave that at auto and let it do its thing, unless some extreme circumstances require me to do something otherwise. All right, briefly I want to touch on the frame rate, codecs, and resolution here. Nothing crazy. I think we all kind of know, looking into this, what we got here. So just in the compressed codecs, we have the full frame sensor here. We're going to be able to go and get raw LT, XFAVC, HEVC, and then we also have, I believe these are new to this C80, these were not in the C70, which was XAVC-S, which is going to be even more compressed codec over the already compressed XAVC. So if you want to save a little bit of room there, I guess that's fine. So also in the resolution, we have all the normal interframe and long GOP from DCI, UHD, the whole way down, and I'm sure a bunch of frame rates no one will ever use. What we also have here too is if you change the sensor to Super 35 mode, you can come over here and now you get raw ST for a codec, but if we hit raw LT, now you can record raw in 60 frames a second. In the full frame raw LT, you can only record up to 20 or 30 frames a second, so keep that in mind. Something else I thought was real interesting, I had noticed this while I was playing around. When you do go to Super 35 mode, it is not in 4K DCI. We actually have a 4.3K sensor. So a little bit more playroom there than what we normally get. Also, when you want to get 120 frames a second, you can do that by going to the Super 35. So we'll put it in the crop sensor. Go over here, pick whatever your you can go over here, pick whatever your container is, and in fast and slow mode, you can go up to 120 frames a second. And I believe in a long GOP, you can get up to 180 frames a second, is what I saw online. So you could test that out. I don't think it's anything I will ever need, but it is there if you need it. Okay, here I want to briefly touch on the memory for the camera. Obviously, it's still SD cards, just like the C70 was, which, in my opinion, that was kind of a little bit of a cripple. The Canon cripple hammer. I was really hoping to see a CF Express put into the C80. Unfortunately, we didn't get that. You have to get the C400 for that. So I don't know. A lot of people are complaining that it's Canon's usual cripple hammer, but I think it's probably just more of a thing that they're just trying to save money with the same type of design rather than having to redesign the camera. But you know, why the R5 has a CF Express but this doesn't, beyond me. One important thing. So we don't really. So still SD cards, which there's not much to say about it. We know how that works. One thing I will say about it that I was real curious about, that 6K full frame raw LT. Do you need V90 cards for it? Yes, I am running V90 cards for it just to make sure there's no lag. However, I did put some V60 cards on there with the raw LT and at 6K, and I just let it roll, and I got no interruptions for about 10 minutes before I stopped it. So I didn't just let it roll for an hour, but it does seem that the V60 cards work perfectly fine with the raw in pretty much any codec the whole way down. I also was using the V60 cards for the 4K 120 frames a second, and I had no low write speed, so I think the V60 cards are going to be perfectly fine for these cameras. And I was using Pro Grade. I tried three different types of cards just to make sure too. It was the SanDisk V60, the Pro Grade V60 and V90, and then the don't use these cards, but the Lexar V60. Those are just kind of like my throwaway cards that I have that I do personal stuff with, that I don't really care if it, you know, becomes corrupted and deleted, because I have an entire bin full of Lexar cards that are corrupted. Story for another day. So nothing much to say there. The only other thing to add was, if you do use V30 cards in this, it does struggle anything more than 4K 24 frames a second. I've had it struggle with an intra format, so you're going to want to use the inter format with that if you're ever forced to use the V30 cards, but you probably shouldn't have them in here regardless. All right, for this next test, I have two little helpers here. We have Jude, our 5-month-old. He's going to come and help us, and my beautiful wife too, who's going to be our model. For this one, I really want to be testing the digital stabilization. There is a difference in it from the C70 to C80. The C70's digital stabilization. Hey, get back inside! The C70's digital stabilization was based on the subject, so the sensor was trying to digitally stabilize based on the movement of the subject or what I was focusing on. The C80 is different because it is stabilizing based on the movement of the camera, so it's more like a gyro stabilization. So we're going to test the. We're going to do a few tests on the two of these, starting with the C70 and then moving on to C80. I do want to note for this digital stabilization test that both cameras are going to have the 24-70 on it set at 35 millimeters. That way everything's the same. The stabilization inside the lens is going to be on. Alright, ninja walk. Okay, regular walking. Hi, Jude. Alright, ninja walk. And a ninja walk. Keep going. One of my complaints with the C70 with the digital stabilization, not that I use it a whole lot, I usually don't use not much stabilization at all, but when I do detail shots at the wedding or whatever, I'm doing like, you know, these kind of movements or like twist down at, you know, whatever I'm shooting, flowers or at the tables or whatever. If it's toward the end of the day and you're carrying this around all day, it starts to get a little bit heavy, so your movements aren't that smooth. But with the C70, it would give me kind of this wobbling effect no matter what I did. So I wasn't a big fan of the digital stabilization, so I usually just didn't use it at all. So we're going to use the stabilization between these two just to show the difference. But the digital stabilization in the C80 does seem to be a little bit better. Anyone that's used a Blackmagic camera before, they have the gyro stabilization in there. And then in DaVinci Resolve, it stabilizes really well, and it doesn't really give you as much of that jelloing effect. So that's what I'm hoping to see here, just with these, you know, these little movements here and just the twist down. They can kind of give us more of that gyro stabilization rather than like that actual real digital look, because it starts to get a little jello-y. After the triple base ISO, this was the #1 thing that sold me on the C80 was the autofocus. Of course, they were all just rumors to start with that said that the C80 is going to have a much better autofocus system. With the sensor that's in the C80, the stacked backside illuminated CMOS sensor, it allows the readout to be a lot faster, which gives the camera a lot better autofocus and a lot faster. So just a little bit of the testing of this camera that I was able to do before today, before we really got into it. It is 100 times better. The C70's autofocus was okay, but it was nothing really to write home about. I didn't think it was any better than the R5, the R5 Mark II, the R5C. I think they all had better autofocus. So the C70 wasn't great, but this C80 is, in short, fantastic. It is really good. We're gonna do a couple of tests. You can't always really tell unless you're there behind the camera to see how good the autofocus is, so you might just have to trust me with my word. But with the C70 having such good and fast autofocus, even if you're using lenses that aren't parafocal, it still fights through that to give you a really fast focus, and you really don't even notice it. So lenses that aren't parafocal seem like they are. Another thing that the new autofocus system has is its full sensor coverage. So even if you're way out here or way out here, I've noticed that the camera keeps focus even when people or things or whatever you're focused on is starting to go off the screen. I kept hearing people refer to the autofocus in the C80 while I was doing research about it as snappy, and there really is no other way to describe the autofocus in this camera other than snappy. I mean, it grabs people's faces or whatever you're trying to get a hold of very fast. If I want to put the tracking on somebody's face or an object and just kind of move around it, it sticks to it perfectly. Good job. You're crazy. This next test is going to be rolling shutter. For wedding videographers, it doesn't really I haven't seen it matter a whole lot to a lot of wedding videographers. The way that I shoot, the rolling shutter does matter a little bit to me, probably more than most wedding videographers. I like to shoot in just 24 frames, and I like to shoot very behind the scenes and documentary, so I do get my camera moving, couples moving and running around. So every once in a while, I will get a little bit of that whiplash kind of look from some of the straight lines. So in the new C80, the stacked back illuminated sensor has much faster readout speed, so the rolling shutter should be a lot less obvious than it is in the C70. So this part I want to go over the physical changes between the C70 and C80. A lot of these I don't think are going to matter for wedding videographers specifically, so we're not even really going to touch on most of those. Like there's an Ethernet port in the back of the C80 now. I don't think many of us are going to be using that, if anyone at all. And if you are, good for you. I don't know what the hell to do with it. But so we're going to go over some of the changes. We're going to skip over some of them just because they're not going to matter to what we're doing. So to start, I think one of the biggest ones was the addition of the SDI port. Again, does not matter for probably 95% of wedding videographers. However, it did matter to me a lot. I was very excited for the SDI port to be added, especially some people were kind of thought it was strange to put it up on top, but I actually kind of liked it. It keeps the, you can see here, it just keeps the wires all out of the way of everything, and keeps them short. So my problem with the C70 here is when I had the monitor up here and the wire for the HDMI cord, it kind of just, it covers up the rest of these ports, and I was always like moving it to try to hit the ND filters, or I was always accidentally hitting the wire for it. And even though I have this little brace here, it did pop out all the time just because I'm moving so much, or you know, so it was nice to have the locking SDI port. Again, for most people it's not going to matter. I liked it. The next change that I thought was probably should have been in the C70 in the first place, but they finally added another screw hole. There's a 3/8 screw hole to the bottom, so you can mount your Arca Swiss plates or your Manfrotto plates straight to the bottom rather than needing one of these plates or a whole cage. Ooh, sorry, that was really loud. So, you know, this just added, you know, one more thing to the bottom and added a little bit extra weight, which was kind of a pain. So I don't even have to add a plate to this to run and gun it, and to go handheld. It's nice just to be able to put that plate right on the bottom, be able to put it on a tripod or monopod without needing any extra accessories. I can't talk. The next obvious thing is the handle. They really improved upon this from the C70. The C70's handle was just completely unusable. It was very flimsy. It just didn't feel good either. So as you can see on the C70, I didn't even use it. I have this one from Small Rig that I use, and I really liked it. But I do actually, even though this handle in the C80 is made out of plastic, I really do like it. It feels very solid. It feels good in my hand. It's lightweight, but it still feels like, solid. It doesn't wiggle around like the C70 did. So there's little grooves underneath the screw hole that keep it from twisting and moving around, even with this monitor and all the weight and the microphone and everything on it. My only complaint with this handle is that if you try to add a monitor, which many people do, the only mounting point is directly on the top here where you can see. I would have liked to have one on the front too, because that's where I like to have my monitor. Like you see on the C70, I like to have it on the front so I can lay it down flat if I want. It makes everything very tall, and if I had this microphone mount that it came with properly installed on here, it's actually sitting up. It's blocked by the monitor, so I just flipped it upside down and put those screws in there. It still works that way, but I would say not the best not the best design in the world, but it works. I'm happy with it, and I'm probably just going to roll with this for quite a while. The next big one that I think everyone was asking for an upgrade from the C70 is the screen hinge. There's little locking, you can hear them here. Little locking pins on the screen, so it locks into place. On the C70 here, it's very, you can see it's very wobbly, and I usually just keep it closed all day when I'm shooting and just use the monitor anyways, and like I can just, while I'm walking around, I can feel it just wiggling around, and the screen feels cheap. It feels like it's going to break off at any point. So the hinge on the C80 is definitely a lot better. It gives it a lot more friction. So a welcome upgrade. I'm still not crazy about the screen, but it's certainly upgraded from the last one. I think a physical change that wasn't really talked about much is just the feel of the camera itself. It has like this really fine like sandpaper feel, like a 1000 grit sandpaper. It actually feels really nice compared to the C70 was. It has a smooth finish to it. This has more of a rough finish, so it actually feels a lot nicer and feels more. It feels more rugged almost. Another one that was kind of the bane of my existence was this joystick back here on the C70 was not conducive to shooting handheld. I hated the placement of it. I hate the feel of it. A lot of times I'll click left 3, 4, 5 times before it even does anything. It just, anyone that has used this, I think most of us know, it was bad placement and bad design altogether. So with the C80, that they put the same joystick that was in the R6 II, and I believe the R5 Mark II as well. So, and they moved it a little further to the left and put the buttons over here to the right. So it feels way more natural, because I'm always using this to this joystick to move stuff around. So it just feels more natural in your hand, and that kind of just gets your hand away from this back dial here as well. Because I found myself, when the joystick was here and I was trying to move it, I was always hitting that back dial. So I just left it with nothing programmed to it, because I was always, when I had aperture on it or something, I was always changing it by accident and not noticing. So definitely a welcome upgrade there. One thing I was hoping that they would upgrade is this little wheel back here. I was hoping they would give it some friction, and it's still just as loose as the C70. In fact, I think it got even worse. So not happy with that. I was hoping it would have kind of like more hard stops, like the top wheel by the shutter button had, or the record button. It has hard stops, so you can actually like feel it. This has no feel to it. It's smooth as it goes around. Or another change is kind of hard to see. Right here is the internal mic for the C80. It is only a mono mic now, so there's only one internal mic. The C70 did have two, one on each side of the lens mount there. Something else that always annoyed me, when you go into the menu system here on the C70, you could never actually click. You can never touch the menu items here and go down and hit things. So now it's actually fully touchscreen. Why the C70 never had this, I don't know. Kind of strange to me. But the C80, you can actually touch the menu now. The next thing, and I'm not going to really spend any time on this at all, there's a hot shoe mount here, an active hot shoe mount. So maybe Canon comes out with an EVF or a microphone they can plug into it or something at some point. Maybe someone gets some use out of that. As wedding videographers, I would probably just use it as a mounting point for something, and that's it. So I'm not too crazy about it. I don't think it's really going to matter for the type of work that we do anyways. Another change that I noticed, I don't believe was in the C70, when you go in here and you change, go to main resolution and you change to a intra frame, you can now change the bit rate to 240, 360, and 480. I believe, if I remember right, in the I could be wrong, I'll have to check. In the C70, there was no 360. I believe there was only 240 and 480 or something like that, or maybe it was 600. But I don't remember there ever being 3 bit rates to be able to choose from. Slow and fast recording, you can go up to 120 frames in 4K. I do, however, believe you can only do that in Super 35 mode, not full frame. For the most part, everything else throughout the menu system was kind of the same as the C70. Not too much has really changed that I've noticed. One of the complaints that I had when I tried to go and set the rear select dial to my aperture is it's gone from the menu. So it's actually something they took out of the menu system from the C70. So hopefully with a firmware update they'll re-add that. But as you can see here, the rear select dial, they just have reverse and normal, but you can't actually set the dial to anything, which is really kind of strange. I don't know if I'm overlooking it, but I did have somebody else that I talked to who has a C80 say the same thing, that they couldn't find that. Lastly, for any physical changes, I think the only other thing that really mattered here was there's a little bit of cable management added. Again, most people won't even really care. All right, here it is, the end of the video. This is the last chapter is going to be kind of a conclusion video on what I think of the C80 versus the C70. I'll just give my SparkNote version for any of those that care to listen. I know I'm just some asshole that runs around with a camera at weddings, but I did do a lot of testing over the last several weeks with this camera, just running around recording things. Unfortunately, I haven't had a wedding yet, which there's one coming up this weekend, so we are going to have a lot of footage to put out there, and I'll probably do another video because I'm going to be recording with a C70 and a C80 for this wedding. I'll have more stuff to put out and what I really think getting live use out of it. But all the tests I was able to do that you're able to see in this video, and I apologize for being so long. I just wanted to give as many tests as possible for you guys to see. But hopefully this video gives you guys sort of an idea of the comparisons between the two. So I'll quickly go through exactly just what I think from having my hands on both of them. I've been running around my house and at work and other places just using these cameras like a maniac, try to see how they compare with each other. So the most important question that we're going to try to answer is the C80 worth it over the C70, or should you just stick with the C70? Or if you're in the market for one of these two, should you save your money and just go get a used C70? The short answer here is it depends, and I know no one wants to hear that. You're going to have to really decide for yourself. I would say, though, before I really get into this conclusion, that the C70 is probably just going to be the camera that's good enough for most people. I'm glad I got the C80, and I'll be using both cameras on wedding days, but this is definitely, the C80 is 100% going to be my A cam. But I'll go through some things, but like I said, the C70 is just, it still holds its own even 5 years later. So first I'm going to start with why I would buy this C80 again and why it's going to be my A cam and why I think it is better than the C70. First, the biggest thing that I noticed between these two, I was doing a lot of low light testing, the C80's autofocus at nighttime or in low light or in when you have to use a high ISO is just far superior. The C70 is not even in the same league with the autofocus as the C80. Not even comparable. Even just very static shots. When I had them both on the tripod in low light, I had face recognition. Me and my son were right in the middle of the frame, and the C70 just kept going in and out of focus constantly. The C80 just never lost it. The autofocus altogether on this C80 is far superior. So if that's something important to you, the C80 is just a million times better with the autofocus, especially with that face tracking. Once it finds a face, you could be running all over the place like a maniac, and it's still just going to keep your face. You turn your face, you walk off screen and come back. It is snappy. It is very good. Very. The other thing that was real big on this camera was that triple base ISO. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. Another reason why I will forever use this camera. It'll be my A cam. Specifically for weddings, I am constantly just changing the ISO to do quick adjustments and stuff, especially when you get into the reception, because I love dancing footage and I love all that that stuff at the end of the night. The C70, man, once I went over 3200 or 6400 ISO, it just the very noisy image. So this at 12,800 ISO, I can turn my lights down real low and still catch an incredible shot. One thing I did notice in a lot of these shots, even with 3200 ISO all the way down, when you're trying to get that high dynamic range image with like you're backlit by a window or next to a window or something, a lot of times when you try to pull the shadows up or something, there was still, even at higher ISOs, there was still a lot of grain in the C80. A triple base ISO isn't necessarily meant to give the most clean image in the world. It's not meant to make all the grain go away. The triple base ISO is to give you 3 places where your dynamic range is going to be at its maximum. So that's where you should be getting your 16 stops of dynamic range if this thing really is 16 stops. Another thing I'll touch a little bit, I don't believe it's 16 stops of dynamic range. But anyways, so the triple base ISO is supposed to give you 3 places where you're going to have the highest dynamic range, and it does clean up the shadows, and it does clean up the image with the grain as you hit those stops, 800, 3200, and 12,800. But sometimes in those lower values, 800 to 3200 and anything in between, the C70 was a little bit cleaner with that DGO sensor. The shadows were a little bit cleaner. But once you have a completely dark image, a reception, you're outside just being lit by a lamp or a small light, that the C80 being able to reach that 12,800 ISO was just absolutely incredible. And again, not even, these two cameras aren't even in the same league when it comes to that. One thing I will touch on with these two cameras, 2 different sensors. So I expected a little bit of color differences in them, maybe just like a hair different. It was actually pretty big, and you'll be able to see in a lot of these shots where, especially when I push and pull the offset in DaVinci Resolve, where I'm pulling it really far down or really far up, or we're having blown out highlights or a really dark image, you'll start to see where the C80, or I'm sorry, where the C70 is very magenta. The whites are very, very, very magenta. I did, for every single shot that I did in this entire video, I made sure white balance was perfect. If I was outside in the sunlight, 5600. Anytime I was lighting, I had make sure my lights here are at 5600. So I tried to match everything so the white balance was perfect. So the C70, and I've always known this because I've always had trouble with it, the C70 is very, very, very magenta. All the images, everything's magenta. The C80 is not. It's a little bit more on the green side, actually. I'd say it's like 1 over toward the green. So I don't really have a magenta shift. When you do start to push and pull, and those low lights and those highlights, it does start to shift a little bit green. So keep that in mind if you're using both of these. When I applied the same LUT, and literally everything was the same between the two cameras, same lenses, everything. I was still getting these shifts. So I'm probably going to be making myself a correction LUT. That way I can just drop it on both, and it's going to shift them both to the same exact colors. So it shouldn't take too much, but just keep that in mind. The thing I want to add to before we really get into it is a lot of these tests, I did my best with them. I tried to show you some values and stuff, but the C80 isn't meant to be like a studio camera, like everything's perfectly set up, kind of like I have here. It is a run and gun camera. I mean, it's meant for getting out there and whether shooting documentaries or weddings or anything. So having a perfect place to test all this really isn't, I didn't really think showed the true value of this camera. So as I'm out there shooting weddings and stuff, I'm going to put out more content, what I really think of this camera. But I want to see how this does run and gun, how I can do things quickly, and how I can, bring back the shadows or bring back the highlights and things, rather than, this is a perfect environment right now, so everything should look really nice. That's not what this camera is meant for. Another thing I had to do autofocus too that I thought was very impressive with the C80, 120 frames a second. The autofocus was absolutely amazing. So I was recording the kids out in the yard who were just spinning and dancing, and a lot of movement, a lot. And the autofocus was catching their faces just absolutely perfect. No troubles with it at all. So again, I can't praise the autofocus of this camera enough. The C70 and 120 frames a second, it struggled. So I never used it ever. So I'll touch on the dynamic range of these two cameras briefly. From my testing on both of these, I think that the C70 is still better. I think the dynamic range in the C70, I was A lot of times I thought the highlights were going to come back in both of these the same, and the C70 just seemed to, if I had to give the prize to one of the two for highlights, I think the C70 pulls them back a little bit better. They're very comparable. But the more and more I did testing, even after I recorded a lot of this stuff for the video, it seemed like the C70 was just pulling it back better. As far as the shadows, again, like I said, with that DGO sensor, the shadows were a little bit cleaner, and being able to pull them back up seemed to go to the C70 slightly. When I use the offset or I use HDR wheels or anything in DaVinci and I pulled shadows back up, I tend to lose a little bit of that nice contrast in the C70, but there was more detail there, if that makes sense. So when I pulled it up with the C8, when I pulled my shadows back up and the darks back up with the C80, there was still contrast. I wasn't really getting as much of that like faded film look, but there wasn't quite as much detail, I think. It's really hard to tell, but I would say between these two cameras, the C80, or I'm sorry, I would say between these two cameras, if I had to give a winning prize to the dynamic range, I think the C70 takes it. I still think it has the best dynamic range, but it's close. The sharpness tests, if you saw that part of the video, there's no comparison here. C80 wins by a mile. Obviously, it's a downsampled 6K into the 4K, and it's full frame sensor. It's far sharper, way sharper. The C70 had a soft image day one, which it looked really nice. It gave it that filmic vibe. I would rather have that sharp image. Especially sometimes I like to use black mist filters, but once you put that on the C70, it just gets really soft in those highlights, really soft, which it looks kind of nice sometimes, but it's a little too much. So on the C80, I'm going to feel a little bit better about putting those on there and knowing that I still have that, my highlights are still a little bit sharp. I think the number one thing that people were asking for in the next C70 Mark II or whatever was whatever Canon was planning on coming out with was a full frame C70, and that's essentially what we got here. So that has I never minded the C70 being Super 35. I thought it had a great image and everything. It didn't really bother me that much. Maybe the low light wasn't always the greatest, but I liked the sensor. I always really liked it. I used a Sigma 18 to 35 1.8 for a lot of for most of my videos. That was pretty much my go-to lens. So, but my biggest complaint with that was the crop factor of that Super 35 lens, which was about 1.6, 1.5, whatever it was. Some people think it was a lot less. So a lot of times I like to record my weddings really behind the scenes and just kind of like following people around. So you get in these really tight hotel rooms, or I think the first time I like had the C70 I really noticed was I was in an elevator with a couple and I was trying to get them both in on frame, and I happened to have a 24 to 70 on it at the time, and I just could not. I had to turn the camera back and forth between them. I just could not get wide enough. So a full frame sensor is going to be amazing, especially for these tight areas where you can get a wider picture. You can get a true 24 millimeters. So what's going to be nice is not having to make those lens changes. I can pretty much just leave my 24 to 70 on the C80 all day long and not have to worry about trying to put my 18 to 35 on there just so I could get that wide shot. So this full frame sensor is definitely going to be something, at least for me, that I really appreciate. So it's just less gear I have to carry around all the time. I can put my one lens on it and I'm ready to roll for the entire day. Also being able to, if I do need that extra reach too, it is nice having that Super 35 mode in the C80 as well, so that I can put it back down and I can get that extra reach at 75 millimeters on the 24 to 70. I think it's more like 95 millimeters or 100, 95 I think it is. So I can get that extra reach too, and just by one click of a button to get it down to the Super 35 mode. The physical changes, to the body. So after I recorded much of this video, I was using both, especially the C80, using it as much as possible, just get my hands on it because I need to feel very comfortable with it on wedding day. The screen I still just do not like. It is better than the C70. The C80 screen is better than the C70. It has a little bit more friction and it locks into place, but again, it feels so hollow. I still feel like I'm going to break it. So the same thing when I'm shooting. I will keep that closed and I'll just use a monitor on the wedding day. I was never going to get rid of the monitor to begin with, but I still don't like the screen. The top handle that comes with it, I don't care what anyone says. It's great. I'm going to use it. It does not wiggle around one bit like the old Canon top handles that were absolutely awful, by the way. Horrible design. Fire whoever developed those. This new one, fantastic. Does not move. It's lightweight. Yes, it's plastic. It works. It works great. I just don't like the placement for my monitor on it, but it's just something I'll have to get used to. I do have one or two other physical changes that or things that they kept for the C80 that were in the C70. I'm still not happy with, like the back wheel and things like that. But with the C70 and the C80, some people have complained about they don't like the ergonomics of the camera because it feels like a DSLR, and it does. But if you came from photography, it still feels natural in your hand. So I don't mind it. I think it feels good in my hand. I feel good carrying it all day. I never had any problem with the design of it, other than it is a little bit tall. So when I have my monitor and a top handle on there, it does sit a little higher than I'd like it to. But again, not a big deal. All right, so like I said in the beginning of this conclusion part, would I buy the C80 again over the C70? Yes, absolutely. And I think when I finally get to these dark venues here in Western Pennsylvania, it gets very dark, and Pittsburgh is just always a gloomy area to begin with. We never see the sun here. I think that triple base ISO, man, is just, it's the biggest selling point for me. And without that, I would have never bought this camera. So I think that is going to be amazing. If you're someone who doesn't shoot a lot in dark areas, and you don't need that triple base ISO, go for the C70. Go get one for $3,000. That's hardly used. There's a million of them out there now with this coming out. Go buy two of them for the price of this. Honestly, is what I would probably do if you need to. However, if you were looking for a new camera and you want to stay more in that $3,000 range, being able to get the C70 for $3,000 is a steal, an absolute steal. I wish I could have gotten mine for $3,000 a while back. But I think anyone who goes and gets the C70 is still not going to be disappointed. Even here in year 2024, about to be 2025 here in a couple of weeks, the C70 is going to hold its own, I think, for many years to come still. Even when the C80 Mark II or whatever else comes out, I think people are still going to be using the C70 a lot, and it's going to be an amazing camera. I will never get rid of my C70. That thing will live with me for the rest of my life, and I think so will this camera too. I love the image out of it and everything. And for weddings, it is just it's perfect. But as I use this camera, I think I'm going to love it more and more and more. It's been absolutely amazing for me thus far, and I can't wait to put it to work, just like I did with this C70 here. If you do have the funds and you just can't decide between the C70 and the C80, as long as the funds are there and you have it, go for the C80, 100%. I think it's going to be the better camera overall. Just the sharpness in the image, the autofocus, the triple base ISO are truly great improvements for this camera. Anyone that watched this to the end, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please let me know. If I made any mistakes, you can also let me know. I'm not perfect. I don't know everything. I don't claim to know everything. I just do my best. But I can correct things in the future. Follow us on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. I'm going to be putting out more and more and more from this camera. But I've been very happy with it, and I think it's going to be a tool that I'm going to be able to use for a very, very long time. So thank you so much, and stay tuned for more.